I am here to talk to you about potty training. Just a little bit about me. I know there's also the bios out there, but I am a BCBA at Children's Therapy Corner in Midland. There we do outpatient pediatric therapy as a multidisciplinary team, so there's OT, speech, PT, and we do feeding therapy as well. We work together on shared clients every day. And as a BCBA, I've designed and implemented potty training programs for children with autism, varying levels and methods of communication, challenging behaviors, and other physical conditions as well. So a little bit about me and what I've been doing. So today we're going to talk about potty readiness, potty training programs. We're going to do some troubleshooting, talk about what might come up as an issue as you're looking at potty training, and when to seek outside help. Okay, so the first thing you need to do when you're looking at moving towards potty training is determining if your child is ready for potty training. So one of the studies I reviewed in preparation for this discusses some psychological readiness signs, such as being aware of bladder sensation, indicating that the person needs to be changed, or the ability to understand potty words and have vocabulary. As far as the bladder sensation, if your child is not aware of their bladder sensations, then they won't be able to self-initiate. They won't be able to control those bladder, control like having a peeing. Okay, so that's another time when you might look at some outside help, such as our OTs who are working at like sensory regulation, so that the person is able to register that sensory information to be able to control bladder movements. So physical readiness signs would be the ability to imitate, sit and walk, ability to pick up small objects for some fine motor, and being able to tolerate sitting on the potty for 5 to 10 minutes. Some of the common readiness kind of that fits into this that I've worked on as a BCBA are things like transitioning to the bathroom. Sometimes bathrooms can be really aversive for our kids. It's a difficult thing for them, or it's an unpleasant thing to sit down for a long time. So we work on transitioning to the toilet, sitting on the toilet, getting used to that environment, indicating that the person is soiled. Like I said, with the bladder sensation, that might be addressed through occupational therapy for sensory regulation. All right, so when you're building a potty training program, the first thing you want to do is find a good reinforcer, because that is going to be that high motivation for your learner to do something difficult. So what is a reinforcer? You need to be able to find something that's going to be motivating. It is not going to be good enough if it's just preferred. So if it's something your child really likes, but they're not willing to work for it, then it won't be probably enough for them to do something difficult like go to the bathroom. So you might know that something is reinforcing versus being just preferred if your child consistently gravitates towards that item. If it's something that, if they have to do something to get it, they don't just wander away, like they're willing to stick with something to get access to it. And if it's like out of reach or something like that, they're going to persist to try to get it. So these reinforcers, whatever it is that you identify, it should be something that's not freely accessible to the person. It should be something that you can isolate and kind of reserve just for potty training. If you think about videos is a really common reinforcer. So if you think about videos and your learner can have videos while they're kind of hanging out around the house and they can have it whenever they want, they're not going to be motivated to do something difficult like use the bathroom to earn it, because they know there's other times when they can get that. So you want to make sure that you can isolate it and kind of reserve it just special as a reward for bathroom. Some of the research that I reviewed says that it is good to identify multiple types of reinforcers. So something that's maybe a toy or an item, an activity, and an edible item can be useful if your child is really motivated by food, which a lot of us are, right? So having multiple items will help so that the person doesn't satiate or kind of get tired of earning the same thing over and over, and you can give that high value reward regardless of if they're maybe a little bit more motivated for the food rather than the toy. All right, the next thing is selecting a beverage. So pretty standard, you need to obviously be hydrated in order to use the bathroom. So one of the studies says that you should offer at least 8 ounces of water in the first 90 minutes of the day. So in that when they first wake up, try to get 8 ounces down, preferably in the first 90 minutes. If you can't accomplish that, if your child maybe doesn't drink that much fluid, just do the best you can to try to get as much fluid in as possible. Another study had a strategy to increase fluid intake for several days prior to starting potty training, so you can ensure the person is well hydrated, and then any additional water will lead to using the bathroom. There's lots of things that you can do to try to make, beverages more motivating. You can try to increase fluids like flavor packets, or you could put like fun-shaped ice cubes or dyes, or you can do things to make it look more inviting. You can use preferred fluids like juices or seltzer waters, or whatever you think might help to hydrate. You can also offer like salty snacks as a way to motivate for more fluid. So the next thing you want to determine is how your child will request or self-initiate. You can use your child's typical communication method prior to each bathroom trip. That's what a majority of the studies did. They kind of embedded a requesting component by offering or by helping to prompt the person to request right before each trip. You can use PECs or Proloquo or other speech-generated devices, sign language, vocal requests, or picture icons, visuals, any of that. Whatever your learner uses to communicate, that's what you should use. There's a different study that didn't really target a request specifically, but instead placed a chair in the bathroom as the person would physically initiate by getting off of the chair and getting onto the toilet. So that's another strategy. Just keeping in mind you would need to move the chair out of the bathroom eventually. That's not very functional for them to have to go sit in a chair to then go to the toilet. So you need to kind of fade that away over time. Not all protocols include a requesting component. Sometimes, depending on what your learner's working on, maybe they don't have a really great requesting repertoire. You're working on that in other ways. You can still work on schedule training and then embed that requesting component later on. All right, the next thing is determining a sit schedule. So you now know how you're going to request, what you're going to offer as a reward. Now you need to know how often to take your learner. Most studies recommend starting at a 30-minute schedule. So it's a pretty dense schedule pretty often. You're going to want to definitely prepare yourself to be doing potty training for a majority of the day, at least initially. Once the learner contacts reinforcement, once you start getting things rolling and they're starting to have successful urinations on the toilet, then you can fade that schedule pretty quickly. There's also a study that did dry checks every 15 minutes, depending on if you are using underwear, pull-ups, diapers. You won't know necessarily that your learner has had an accident right away, depending on what you're using, so you might want to add in some dry checks to be able to reinforce that they're still dry, but also to know and be able to give that more immediate feedback if they have had an accident. Okay. Part of that sit schedule, I mentioned the 30 minutes is pretty frequent. Most research agrees that the 30 minutes is a good place to start. But admittedly, that's really intensive for families, and you've got a lot of things going on. There's other children around. There's the requirements of just day-to-day life and all the things that are going on in your life. So one of the studies that was like a parent implemented model had the 30-minute schedule only for times at home. So that could be a really good way to kind of embed this in. If you're going to the store or you have to go to an event or something like that, you can pause the potty training and just do it at home to get started. Another participant in this same study, they had to drop out of the study temporarily, and they had household responsibilities or other children requiring care or something else going on, and they resumed the study later on and were still able to potty train. So if something happens and you're like, yes, I'm ready to potty train, and then life happens and you need to take a break, that's totally fine, and it doesn't mean that you can't just jump right back in. In this study, that participant was still successfully potty trained within 3 months of starting the process. So just because life happens and you have to pause doesn't mean that it's going to set you back significantly. There's also some variations. So if the sit schedule is really dense and 30 minutes is too much, there's like we'll talk a little bit about progressions for how you progress the time. But you can also make modifications to how you are thinning that schedule or extending those durations off the toilet over time to make it a little bit more feasible for day-to-day life. Another good thing to remember is you don't have to do it alone, so recruit help from family members or friends, even if it's just a mental break. That can be really valuable. If you just need somebody to help you clean up a mess, that can be great too. So if you have a good support system, definitely use that. And then consult with other professionals. Don't just struggle with it. If you're having a hard time and it's just not working, then that's the time to consult other professionals for help. All right, the next one is how long to sit for. So we now know 30 minutes is a good starting point for the schedule. How long do you sit for? Most studies had participants sit for 3 to 5 minutes, so not a super long time. It's pretty doable. One of the studies had a really intensive sit duration, and I wouldn't recommend they did a 30-minute sit time, and it was successful, but that would be really difficult to implement at home, sitting there for 30 minutes with your child. So I would recommend, if you're really needing to use that longer sit time, to reach out to somebody for help. And while you're seated, you can use that for creating kind of that positive environment. You don't want it to be overly reinforcing because you want the person to still be motivated to get whatever it is that you're offering as a reward. But you want to make it a fun environment, a good place to be, and a positive place to be, so that the bathroom doesn't become an issue where, they are having trouble transitioning to the bathroom or other things. While sitting on the potty, you can always use visual supports if you think that might help your learner. I've seen first then boards where you could have like a picture of the bathroom, like the toilet or whatever, and then a reward. So you can make it more salient. You can make it more obvious to the learner what they stand to earn. Use those first then statements and bring the item if you can, so that you can show them tangibly, it's right here. All you have to do is use the bathroom. Underwear versus pull-ups. So this is definitely a topic that comes up a lot in my practice. Do we use underwear? Do we use pull-ups? I know it's more convenient sometimes to use pull-ups and pull-ons and diapers because there's less of a mess. So there is that component, kind of as you're choosing what method you want to use. Most research does suggest that just changing underwear alone can have a pretty big impact on how successful the potty training is. The person gets immediate feedback. If they have an accident and they're wearing underwear, they get immediate feedback that, oh, hey, this is uncomfortable. I don't like this. I need to go to the bathroom and change. You, as the caregiver implementing the plan, get immediate feedback to be able to teach, now we need to go to the bathroom. And often when accidents happen, the person might be engaging in some kind of fun activity, and now we have to leave that to use the bathroom because we had an accident. So there's that kind of built-in natural consequence of like, oh, we have to stop something fun, we have to go change, and then we have to come back to it later. If it's not feasible to use underwear, I have also seen like wearing underwear and then putting pull-ons over the top of it. So that gives that like sensory feedback at least that like this feels less comfortable. But you definitely want to embed like the dry checks into that because you won't know that an accident has happened. Okay, so speaking of accidents, what happens when your learner has one? Because they will. At least to start, expect that there will be lots of accidents. You can kind of prepare yourself by, you know, pulling out, they have like continence pads, you can put those on things, you can pull out the kitchen chair instead of the upholstered chair, you can get out the upholstered cleaner. There's lots of things you can do kind of in advance. You can put plastic down in a place that your child is going to be playing a lot. So there's lots of things you can do ahead of time, but when those accidents do happen, you just take learner to the bathroom and change them, providing minimal attention. One thing that I get a lot of questions on is, we'll get to that in just a second, but so take them to the bathroom and change them with minimal attention. If they sit down and still go to the bathroom, that's great. Still reinforce it. Even if they had an accident, it doesn't matter. They went to the bathroom on the toilet. That's our target behavior. So you want to make sure, give that all of the reinforcement that's available. And then if there's an accident and there is no void on the toilet, then take them to the bathroom the next time that timer goes up. So if it's been like 20 minutes and they have an accident, you get done 10 minutes later, you're going to bring them back. In general, I get a lot of questions about like, well, what about reprimands or like, hey, no, don't do that, or punishment, or, you know, wanting to give that. In general, punishment procedures like overcorrection, making lots of trips back and forth to the bathroom, verbal reprimands, or removing privileges is not necessary for potty training. So you really want to focus on that reinforcement aspect. Neutrally respond to the accident. You don't need to add a negative consequence, and then focus on that reinforcement. Next time, if you go to the bathroom, you get to earn this really fun thing. So then you can make it that more positive environment. All right. So the next thing is what happens if there's a success. Especially the first success, and early on, throw a party. It should be like the best thing ever that it's finally happened. You've worked so hard, you've done all of this, and you finally, even if it's like the smallest little drop, doesn't matter, reinforce it with all of the things that you've already identified. You should have them with you, you should give them right away. Use whatever it is that's preferred by your learner and give all of it. So a couple of the studies did slightly different things for the reinforcement. They reinforced, okay, so it's time for a bathroom trip, let's go to the bathroom. When they checked them in the bathroom and they were dry, they gave them the reward. So you want to do that, so you want to reinforce the dry, but then if they have a success, you also want to reinforce that with all of the things that you've identified. As I mentioned, I can't stress enough, even if it's like a little tiny drop, it doesn't matter, that earns all of the reinforcement. Okay, so now that the learner, hopefully they've started using the bathroom, they're on that denser schedule, that 30-minute schedule. So now we need to increase the time between those potty trips because you've been working really hard. 30 minutes is tough. So after you have a few consecutive days, 3 consecutive days according to research, that's when you can move up that time interval. The progression, there's a couple of different methods that worked for the progression. I think the simplest is 15 minutes. So if you start at 30, then you go to 45, 60, 75. If you have some kind of issue where you move from 30 minutes to 45 minutes, and then accidents start happening. Again, you can back that time off 5 or 10 minutes just a little bit and build it up more incrementally. If your learner is just cruising through and they're getting it and they're doing it really fast, then you can do like a day where you try 90 minutes and see how it goes. And if they're not able to do that, then again, back it off to that previous interval. The next thing, so once you get to that 90-minute, that's kind of the standard that most of the research studies were trying to get to, was that 90-minute time frame to remain dry. So once you get there, you can start reducing the reward. It's not going to be feasible probably to forever reinforce bathroom with Skittles or iPad or whatever it is, so you definitely want to work on reducing that reward to a more natural contingency. You can reduce by first eliminating those dry checks and reinforcement for the dry checks, so you wouldn't give them that special reward for just being dry. You'd only give it for eliminations, and then moving from that item reward to just praise for using the bathroom. Okay. All right, so that's the majority of like building a program and kind of those components to really focus on. The next thing that we're going to talk about is a little bit of troubleshooting, because never in any potty protocol that I've ever written has it gone like perfectly according to plan. Every single one has needed to be adjusted, and I think that is something good to remember. If it's not working and you're kind of spinning your wheels, that's really normal, and you just need to work patiently one component at a time to try to make adjustments. Some common things are if the child doesn't seem very motivated, if you're offering something and they're kind of like looking over here, they're not paying attention to you, they don't look like they're focusing. You might not have a good reinforcer. You might have something preferred, but maybe not something that they're going to work for. You might also not be giving enough. So if it's like they're going to the bathroom and then they get one Skittle, that might not be enough Skittles. They might need like a whole handful to start off with. Give them a whole package. Whatever will get the job done to start. And you can always fade that down later on. They also might not understand that they stand to earn something. So you can play with some visuals or bringing the item and some first then statements to try to help them understand what the reward is. Another common thing that happens is accidents between trips. That's probably the most common. So if you're looking, you're on like a 30-minute schedule, and every time you leave the bathroom, they have an accident immediately. That can be incredibly frustrating. One thing that you can take a look at is if you're seeing those accidents, you can kind of jot it down. Jot it down on a piece of paper, on a whiteboard on the fridge or whatever, and see if you can nail down a time of day that that's happening. So if you can find like an hour or two time frame that like, oh, they always have an accident between 11 and 1. You can look at making the schedule a little bit shorter during that time, and you take them more often during that trouble time to try to get that success. If you aren't able to find a time of day or it's not really working to just shorten it, you might need to shorten the schedule for the whole day. Then you're getting into a pretty dense schedule. You might need to look at some help being able to do that, because that's really taxing on people. Another thing you could look at is a portable potty chair. So you could bring that portable potty chair in one of the studies. They brought it into their treatment space and where the child was learning, and it was just there to be closer. It reduced that transition time so that they could make it to the bathroom instead of having accidents like on the way. All this, you're just trying to get that first success, that first couple of successes. Another thing that can happen is you're on the schedule, you're doing lots of fluids, you're taking them really often, and time again, they're not going, and it's been a really long time. I've had like some very alarming durations of time, like 12 hours, where nothing was happening. So obviously, that's a big concern. That can be a medical concern. And if you can't fix that pretty quickly, you'll need to, reach out to outside help, maybe suspend the potty training program, talk to your pediatrician. But in general, if that's what's happening, you can try to increase fluids and see if you can motivate that a little bit better. You can extend that sit time. Maybe you're doing like 3 minutes. You can try increasing to 5 or 10 minutes. And another thing you could do is just check to see if they're physically comfortable. Like maybe if they're sitting on the toilet and maybe they're on an adult toilet and they're a little person, maybe they need like a potty seat to sit on top of the toilet seat, or maybe like a stool. I had one client who we were kind of going through this long periods of time where there was nothing happening. They weren't using the bathroom. The PT came to pick up from an ABA session, and she just looked at her and she was like, she looks kind of uncomfortable. Why don't we try a stool? And she just like put a stool underneath her feet. She was talking to me about like her core muscles and very specific PT things, but she put the stool there, and then she like at that moment went to the bathroom. So there's just a lot of, it can be like the most minor change, but just playing around, paying attention to if your child is uncomfortable or if you think this might work better, just follow your instincts and try to change one thing at a time and see if you can narrow down what's going on. All right, a little bit more troubleshooting. I know somebody's coming to talk about challenging behaviors tomorrow, so that's really awesome. You might run into a situation where challenging behaviors are happening in the bathroom or on the way to the bathroom or because of potty training. If that's happening, definitely evaluate for safety first. You want to make sure you can keep yourself safe, you can keep the learner safe, and you want to make sure it's something you can reasonably follow through with. If you're starting to run into really big behaviors, things that are lasting a really long time or really intense, I would say that would be the time to reach out and seek additional help. Your pediatrician is a great place to start, and looking at where they could refer you to for additional resources. Another troubleshooting, and kind of, it's not a problem, but if they go every single time, but they're still having accidents, that can be another thing that comes up. So your learner knows how to get reinforcement, which is amazing. They understand when I go to the bathroom, I get this cool reward. They're going every time. I would work on, at that point, quickly thinning the schedule and then thinning the reinforcement. They're obviously getting it. They just need to start working on holding for certain amounts of time, and you might need to play with the reinforcement of like, if they're dry and they go to the bathroom, then they get reinforcement instead of just going to the bathroom or other things. So you can kind of tease that out and isolate, be more specific about what gets reinforced and what doesn't. I have a quick kind of case study. I just went through and was looking at some of my old data from some of my cases and came across this guy, Andy. He was an intensive early intervention program for ABA, speech, OT, PT, feeding. He had all the therapies, and his parents approached me about toilet training. He had a lot of the major readiness indicators. One of the things that was missing, he was not able to sit on the toilet for an extended amount of time. He was very distracted, would get up and run around and come back, and really had a hard time with that. So that's where we started. We just worked on increasing the duration that he was seated. So we worked on this for maybe a month or two, and once we got to kind of an increasing, or a duration of like 90 seconds or so, he really didn't mind sitting on the toilet anymore. We just kept working towards potty training then. So for him, we found that a good reinforcer was the iPad. So we used that, and we decided 5 minutes is a pretty good amount of time. We were going to give 5 minutes for the iPad. He was fine drinking water. If we asked him to take a drink, he did that just fine. For requesting, we just verbally prompted him before trips. We took him for 50 minutes to the bathroom, and then he sat for 3 minutes. He was in underwear, and that was kind of his protocol. The first thing that happened is he was having constant accidents everywhere. all the time. And so we changed from a 50-minute schedule to a 30-minute schedule, which research tells us is the place to start. So that worked a lot better. We also tried different potty seats because the 30-minute schedule on its own. So yeah, we adjusted the sit schedule. That didn't quite do it. It kind of helped a little, but it wasn't all of it. So then we tried some different potty seats. We started using one of those small portable toilet training seats, and we increased his sit duration to 10 minutes. We kind of did these each one at a time and tried to figure it out, and finally he started having successes, started moving through the protocol. We started increasing by 15 minutes at a time that duration that he was on the toilet or off the toilet. The next problem that happened was he was going on the toilet. It was great, but he was missing the bathroom, the toilet. So we had to work on that. So we worked on adjusting his seated position, maybe leaning forward, or I think his parents even tried having him sit backwards on the toilet, and we found a good thing for that. So that was the next thing that happened. Finally, he was not initiating on his own, so he was schedule trained at 2 hours, so he could wait 2 hours. He was dry, but would not ask for the bathroom on his own. He hadn't put that piece together. So we started by trying to have him ask like right before going into the bathroom, and the idea was to fade back so that he was a little bit farther away from the door each time, but that didn't really work great, which was fine, so we just kept trying something new. The next thing we did was at the 2 hours, we didn't just take him each time. We asked him, like, he had the ability to respond to yes or no questions, which was really helpful for this, and we had been working on that as part of his ABA and speech programs. So we started asking him, do you need to go to the bathroom? And he would say yes or no. If he said yes and he went, then he would get his iPad. And then he started reliably letting us know yes or no he needed to go to the bathroom, so that was great. And then the last step was we only reinforced if he asked on his own, and that was kind of our last step. And finally, he was able to start requesting on his own for the bathroom. He is now a fully potty trained young man, and we did it as a team. So that was great. Just a quick note about seeking outside help. We touched on it throughout, but if you're having problems that are persistent, if you're seeing challenging behaviors, if you're not able to maintain a schedule that's dense enough because there's just, it's too often, or you're not able to figure that out, within your family, that's a good time to seek some outside help and support. Also, if you're trying and you can't find anything effective to motivate somebody, that would be a good time to seek outside help, or if medical issues arise. So in summary, just quickly, this is all a starting point for building some strategies, some ideas. If you're going through the throes of potty training, maybe some of this gave you some ideas for where to go next. Make sure you find that reward and your beverage. Make sure you find a good sit schedule and the sit time. Use underwear, most likely if you can. Reinforce successes and redirect accidents. You don't need to punish accidents. If something isn't working, just adjust one variable at a time and be patient with yourself and with your child. You aren't alone, so seek help if you're struggling. CTC has locations in Midland, Lansing, Traverse City, Grand Rapids. You can reach out to us to schedule a consult. You can reach out to your pediatrician for additional resources for where you might need to go next. Yeah, and that is all. Thank you so much.